Here we go. Charlie Light, welcome to the show, my friend.
Yeah,
How
thanks
we
for
doing?
having me. Doing pretty well. Just shit posting and, spending all day on Twitter as usual.
That is precisely one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you. So, dude, I've followed you on Twitter for a little while now. I know we've gotten to know each other a little bit online, but I have a lot of questions for you. You've done some really awesome and also hilarious things, which is one of my favorite combinations of things. And so wanted to talk about some of those. But first, wanted to start with, so your current Twitter bio or X bio reads, turned at Coked Up Options meme account into a $40,000 a month content agency and sold it. That's cool. Can we back up a little bit to you starting this meme account at Coked Up Options? And where'd you come up with that idea? How did you start to test it? Let's rewind a little bit.
Yeah, so I started it April 2020 just because I was basically bored when, the world was shut down, and I had always been on Twitter, probably for the past, 6 or 7 years, would always just read my favorite accounts, but never tried my hand at writing on there. So I decided, I'll just, toss up a parody account, see what happens. I didn't know it at the time, but that would be the absolute perfect time to grow a finance meme parody account. So
right.
it totally took off as, I think at that point, right when I started it, that's when markets were totally crashing. And then a little bit after that, that's when, tech stocks started going up 20% every single day, basically. So there was obviously a lot of, looking back, there was some crazy event going on basically every day that you could meme, and there was endless material. So I grew it to about, I think, 5,000 followers within the first month. And then, I just thought it would be a silly little thing I did on the side and probably forgot about it. But that's when I realized, okay, people actually are interested in this. I grew it to about 40,000 near the end of the year. Through that whole time, it was still just a fun side project. I would just, be on Twitter all the time, but it wasn't a business at all. So that's when I started thinking, okay, how can this, I enjoy doing this. I'm pretty good at running a Twitter account, I guess. And how can I actually turn it into something? Just totally by chance, got a few random clients who reached out.
Just real quick, so people listening who maybe aren't on Twitter or X as much, the account, the handle is Coked Up at Coked Up Options.
Yeah. And
the name is it John W. Rich, in parentheses wealthy?
Yeah.
And so the concept is, it's this the description is chairman of the board at Yahoo and AOL. It's this older, stereotypical sort of board member or old school type of person who is just out of the scene in the tech community these days, but is just saying these dumb, hilarious things. Did you was that the first one you tried, or were you oh, maybe there's a bunch of these that I could do? Because it's interesting that there's tons of these now because of yours that blew up. So I'm curious.
Yeah, that was the very first account I tried. In early or mid 2020, the parody account thing was not very common. There's really only a couple of them.
Right.
I mean, the two that I can remember already existing were the Senator Eloise Williams account, which is long gone. And then there's the Kenny Lay account, which is oil and gas parody account. But yeah, all the ones that today didn't exist yet. I think the Parikh Patel account was still about a year out from even existing. And Greg and all those, that was more than a year before they were even created. So yeah. No,
I assume all these people, all the real people behind these accounts.
A lot of them I do. Yeah, not every single one of them, but yeah, it's interesting.
Or maybe they're just all you and the people don't know.
Okay,
that's
it's funny. People always wonder that. I think it would be impossible to run two big accounts in the same category, because you'd be then splitting your ideas between the two, and then maybe the accounts wouldn't do so well. There are people who run multiple accounts, but each one is in a different category, because you have to tweet a lot, and you have to have a lot of ideas to go into just growing one of them. And I think people think that it's the same person because things get copied on Twitter a lot. So you make
so
a good
much,
joke,
so
someone
much.
else is going to use it the next week. So then it kind of makes it seem like the same person is writing all these accounts.
Right. That's why it's so interesting to me to come up with this brand new idea when nobody else was doing it. And so you started to grow it. You got to 40,000 followers, and then you're trying to monetize it in different ways. You're like, oh, maybe a satire website that wasn't working out. And then what'd you do?
Yeah, so I tried like kind of all the common money making ideas people have. So yeah, starting a blog, and I think right away I got like 90,000 views on an article, and I was pumped to, I'm gonna make the money's gonna start rolling in, and then I checked a couple days later, and it was like $7 in ad revenue or something. And I tried to do merch. That didn't really, like, you can definitely make a few bucks on the side doing things like that, but like I opened a merch shop, and it was kind of just jokes about all the stocks I would make fun of. And that made like, $50 or something. Like, I think sales were like $100, and I, made like $30 or $40 basically in a couple weeks. So, I could have kept doing that, but then what I realized towards the end of 2020 is there was a much bigger opportunity for me to run Twitter accounts for other people. So I just randomly had a couple people approach me and ask, oh, do you run other people's accounts? I mean, I didn't, but I thought, oh, I'd love to do that. So the first couple clients, I just kind of tossed out a price. I didn't really know what I was doing. It was a big learning curve to like figure out how to write for someone else. But yeah, my first client, I think they paid $2,000 a month, something like that. And from the beginning, I kind of just had two clients. So I was, putting a ton of energy and time into their accounts and basically making like $4,000 a month doing it. But then
And you're writing on their personal accounts, or they're trying to do like a parody thing too?
Their personal accounts. Almost all my clients, it's always been like a real person running their account. Because anytime I've had people, there's not so much money in like growing parody accounts, just because they probably run into the same issue I did.
What type of people were there? Were these entrepreneurs, VCs, or just random people who would DM you?
Yeah, almost all founders. That's like one really hard thing with ghostwriting is like, I do have this awesome past client list, but unlike other types of marketing, you can't really share who they were because yeah, they don't. Like if I was doing a web design agency and then you could probably show off every client you ever had and they would have no problem with that. But yeah, it's kind of hard because a lot of people, I guess clients don't want the perception that like, oh, they just totally outsource their writing. But yeah, all of my clients were basically founders of either startups or kind of smaller to mid-sized established companies. I ended up finding my sweet spot was like these companies that were big enough that they could pay for my service, obviously, but small enough where they didn't have like a whole marketing team, because I found that it was just on Twitter, you need to try lots of different things. And I think if you have to like run ideas by 3 other people who then, add like the marketing terminology on it, it never really goes that well. So yeah, so basically all founders, not really a couple of times I did like their company account, but we'd quickly realize, okay, it's just much better to grow like an actual person with a face on Twitter rather than like a corporate logo.
Content in general is hard. And so when you're scaling this content agency, like how do you find good talent and teach some of that stuff? And like, where do you find the people and how do you get them up to speed?
I found all my writers from Twitter. So actually, there's this whole group that's like these rich family accounts. So like they would make parody accounts of my parody. So someone made a list of all of them. At one point, there was like 60 or 70 of these people that were like parody accounts. So actually, a couple of them have grown like their own accounts pretty large. So there's the John Rich Kid, which I think has 50 or 60,000 followers. And there's a few others that are John Rich's mom and John Rich's, grandpa. And there's a few kind of crazy ones like, John W. Rich's kids' Wendy's menu and, all sorts of random household objects, basically. So actually, a couple of those people, I hired those people to do some of the work because I knew they understood Twitter. The one other category is I would just hire other people who were ghostwriters. The biggest problem was, the most talented people I hired, they would only stay with me for a couple months because, I'd give them some work. They'd do awesome. I would keep giving them more work. And then one day they'd say, hey, I have my own 3 or 4 clients now and I'm making whatever, $10,000 to $15,000 a month doing that. So obviously it makes sense for me to just focus on that. So I tried, it wasn't worthwhile going to other job boards because I would get a bunch of people who, didn't even know what Twitter was. I think Twitter has a very specific style. So your best bet is just to hire people who have already grown an account. It doesn't need to be a massive account, but, I wanted to hire people that at least had a pretty good feel for how Twitter worked.
Yeah, that's the amazing thing about both content and Twitter, where in other jobs or industries, you might have a resume and talk about how you did these things. In content, you just show it. And on Twitter, you just clearly see, okay, this person would be a good fit or not. And I could just DM them immediately. And so when you grew it, you continue to scale, add these clients, and then you sold it somewhat recently in a year ago or so. Can you talk about what your decision there of, okay, you've done this, you've grown this business, but maybe want to get out of the writing and into something else? And then what are you up to now?
Yeah, so my decision to sell was I feel like I had taken it as far as I could at that point. So, going back to the scaling question, I didn't really know how to grow it any further. I felt like there's two very distinct jobs. There's like the writing, and then there's the managing the actual business. At least for me, it was almost impossible to do both because I was best at the writing when I had absolutely all day to just write. But it's kind of hard to be, running a business and do that, right? Because you got to be on calls with people constantly. So I found that if I had like 2 or 3 calls in a day, then I'd get no writing done because the day was too broken up. I would only have a few minutes to focus between calls. So yeah, basically I sold it to just kind of get actually the management aspect of it off my plate, focus more on writing. And yeah, it's been interesting seeing the content agency space grow because I think over the last year or so, we've seen like dozens of them pop up, which is kind of interesting to see it become a more mainstream. I think pretty soon you'll see that the content is like one of the main categories of digital agencies. Because right now, when you think of a digital marketing agency, you think of, web design, SEO, pay-per-click. Pretty soon, I think content will be another one of those massive categories where everyone's offering, kind of on Twitter now, everyone is offering a content or ghostwriting service, but.
Yeah. And in the DMs, it's wild. That's a huge thing.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say too, to your point about having the proof. One nice thing is, if you are really good at content, it shouldn't be that hard to get clients or to. On Twitter, it's funny when you get a DM from someone and they say they can grow your audience with content, and you click on their profile and they have like 50 followers. That's why all the best ghostwriters, like they're totally chock full. Yeah, just because, everyone wants to work with the ones that have proven they can either grow other people's accounts or grow their own account. But it like you said, it should be very easy to prove, okay, what page did you grow or what profile did you grow?
Right.
So, yeah.
So like taking a step back and just looking at it, you basically were able to get the very precious asset or resource of attention in a bunch of it in a short amount of time. And with that, that opened doors for you you tried, selling stuff through the website or whatnot. You're like, oh, actually there's an opportunity for content agency. If you're starting again, knowing what you know now, what would you do today? Would you do the same thing on Twitter, or do you think that's too crowded, or would you try a different medium, or where would you grow an audience?
I definitely start on Twitter. I guess that's what I know best. So maybe hypothetically LinkedIn's better if you know what you're doing on there, which I kind of do, but not as well as Twitter. Yeah, I would say, okay, on Twitter, there's always these kind of phases that Twitter goes through, where if in 2020, the very popular topics were, say, boring businesses, self-storage, I guess the stock market, that was kind of a little bit before, like the GameStop stuff. So there's like these waves of trends that you can hop on, but you don't have to be the first one, but you kind of have to hop on it while it's still rising. So I would say if I was starting today, I would definitely not do another account like the John Rich one, because that whole thing is kind of played out at this point. There's 1,000 finance parody accounts of, kind of making all the similar jokes. So what I would say is at any given time on Twitter, there's like a few trends that are either just starting or kind of still headed towards their peak. I explain this to clients, but it's not really like helpful for clients because they are their brand is what it is. They're not going to change who they are because one topic is popular on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
So one idea is, you could make a parody account just about whatever topic is trending at any given moment. So like, I think the AI stuff, people are kind of over it at this point. However, 6 months ago, the first few people to really grow in either an AI newsletter or some sort of AI account, they did really, really well. But now that trend is it's, nearing its end. People are sick of it. So, but that's what I would kind of look at is, okay, what can you do that people are interested in now, but there's not enough info about it? But again, if you're trying to grow your personal brand, well, you're not going to, change your identity because some topic is trending right now.
Right. It's almost like you see people during the wave of crypto and we're all Web3 experts. And now perhaps some of those same people are AI experts. And so maybe it's a combination of finding the big waves and then also the ones that you will want to be in regardless for a long period of time and communicating that.
Exactly. That's probably a better way to think about it is, especially if you're building a personal brand, like probably you should actively avoid these trends unless they happen to coincide with what you do. Because, you see that everyone who really jumped into Web3 super hard and that's what they built their audience off of, well, their audience is probably dying now. Their followers have left, either Twitter or they just don't care about that topic, so they don't look at your tweets anymore.
Right, totally. And then last two things. One, what are you up to now?
Right now, the most recent thing is I just launched a community called Solo Writers. I thought of this term, solo writer. I write for clients, but I also write some of my own stuff. Basically, I just write on my own until I seed a bunch of different projects until one of them does really well. So, the Parody account was me just being a solo writer until it turned into something. And then I, made it into a business and hired contractors to help and all that. So basically right now we have a community with like 75 people. About half of them do ghostwriting or run a content agency, and about half of them have like some newsletter or media brand that they run. So we kind of just toss around ideas, or people ask questions, or people will ask for help with some problem they're having in their business, and everyone else will respond with their ideas. So it's a pretty fun thing. I don't know what it'll be beyond that, but I am kind of thinking, okay, how can I turn this into a business? And so maybe that's the next thing I'll do.
That's awesome. I love the idea of that. Obviously, solopreneurs is a big thing, and people don't want to grow these huge businesses. They want it to have a business of one, of just themselves. So I like that, applied it towards writing, and well, I'll definitely check that out too. Last thing, one of the things I like to talk about is making connections. And so to me, connections are either with other people externally or internally with ideas or concepts or these things that you've learned and now you can't unsee them, or you look at the world in a different way. I keep a note in my Evernote for each year of these golden nuggets, or just the things that I'm learning or that kind of sparked this aha moment or intellectual epiphanies. Is there any connection you've made recently or anything come top of mind, whether it's advice from a person or meeting somebody or a concept that just really clicked for you that has made an impact on you?
One really nice thing is I get to meet very different people. So I have a lot of, like in my following or in my network, I have, a lot of people that built really large companies. And then I have, a bunch of like solopreneurs. So I feel like almost the best insights have come from like kind of comparing and contrasting, like, okay, what are the common themes between these very different people, all successful, but in very different ways. Here's a big shift that I had probably in the last year or so is in 2020, 2021, I obviously was super into growing the Parody account. And I was, on Twitter all day, every day. If some breaking news had happened, I was like on it within a few minutes with some meme, like a timely meme that, kind of broke the news to my followers and made a joke about it, basically. I don't know if this is like a specific person that kind of made me realize this. It's probably more just a combo of all the people I've met and talked with. But I think a common theme I've learned about over the last year is like, okay, well, what game do you actually want to play? in business. So I kind of realized, okay, this idea of being on Twitter 24/7 to like capture the trend or, be the first one with the viral meme is really not it's not really a game that's worth playing in the long term. I'm really glad I built up my Parody account, but I think after a while, it's not a game that's worth playing because, okay, once you have 200,000 followers, what's the next, what's the benefit of spending another full month monitoring Twitter and monitoring the news to be the first one to post some viral meme? One thing I've tried to do with my own content and with the clients I've worked with is I don't want to be working with people that the timeliness matters a lot. So, like, for example, I think if you want to grow a stock market account, you've got to be on Twitter all day, at least during the day.
Constant.
If you're not talking about some new, earnings report that came out and was crazy, if you're not talking about that within a few minutes, then okay, well, you're going to fall behind the other accounts that are on it immediately. So I've kind of realized, okay, that's not really something I want to do. I want to work with clients that are more like, okay, who can I write the content for? And a month from now, it'll still be good to post because it's not extremely timely.
Right. Maybe there's like extra leverage with growth that the timely content can maybe boost. But back to your initial thing of like, how do you find the game that you want to play long term?
I think on Twitter, a lot of people don't really think about, what's the long-term brand that I'm really trying to build. They more think about, okay, what can I do right now to just maximize likes, maximize followers? And that might not be the best way to do it.
Yeah, similar to like if you're overwhelmed with something, it's like, okay, will this matter in 10 minutes, 10 months, 10 years? And you zoom out far enough, 10 years, like, of course it's not going to matter in 10 years, nor 10 months, probably not even really 10 minutes. And so maybe applying that similar framework to, am I going to still want to be playing this game in 10 months, 10 years sort of thing?
Right.
And find those long-term games worth playing.
Yeah, I think, if you're trying to build an account based on like investing or business building, there's probably a lot more ways you could go about doing that, where you're, writing content that a year from now someone can still enjoy or find helpful. Yeah.
And I mean, my takeaway really is, I think a lot about this concept of ideation versus iteration. And what I love about your story is you weren't just thinking, oh, maybe I could do this. Maybe you just did it, right? You started the account and you iterated, you got feedback, and that was more valuable than any other idea. So I think with a lot of things, you just get paralyzed and decision fatigue or analysis paralysis, and might as well just like pick one thing, go for it, get some feedback, and then go from there.
Yeah, that's a great way to summarize it, because I'd even say that's how I've worked with clients where, okay, so like if I get in a call with a client, they'll describe, oh, I think this content would do super well. And for a while, I would always try to say, oh yeah, I think it'll do well, and let's try this. But what I realized is I'm horrible at predicting what will do well. I think just about everyone else is horrible at predicting what will do well. Mm-hmm. I mean, every once in a while I publish something and I know it's going to do super well, but for the most part, it's kind of random, and it's kind of, you just have to, you're better off not really strategizing that much. You're better off just like kind of trying every idea that you like and seeing what does well.
Right.
Half of them will just totally flop and you don't even really know why, but half of them will do well. And that can kind of inform your strategy is, okay, what does your audience actually like? Do more of that. I think people end up strategizing a bit too much, especially with Twitter, like, just publish it. Like, it's pretty easy. You don't have to, it's not YouTube where you have to have equipment and possibly a video editor and all that. Like, you could just, write it out. If it doesn't do well, just delete it a couple hours later.
Right. It's so hard to get people's attention too. If it doesn't do well, no one's going to see it anyway. And even if they do, right? If you're writing for yourself anyway, it's like the people who matter don't mind, and the people who mind don't matter. So like, who cares?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Totally. Okay. So very last thing, are there any either writers, maybe they're solo writers in your community, or just maybe some people on Twitter that you think have great content, but are maybe a little underrated or haven't taken off yet?
Yeah, there definitely is. I think Matthew Brown, he does a lot of good stuff about, like, he mostly works with fractional CFOs, fractional CMOs, that type of thing. He has a lot of good content kind of about what we were talking about, where you don't want to chase trends. You don't want to, like, be some memer who is on Twitter 24/7. He has a lot of good stuff about, okay, how do you actually make your account? How do you actually build a valuable audience, and how do you actually translate that into dollars rather than, maximizing your followers? So he's one, I think he's very underrated, I would say, or at least, he'll probably be known by a lot more people. I would say, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really good, like, interesting, I'd say Rand Larson is another one where he does some content stuff, but he also has like a high level peer group for SMB owners. So I think he's a good example of, like, building a high value community. So he has this group of, like, business owners who it's not just like a basic networking group. It's more like, a really valuable community that people pay. I don't know how much they pay, but a lot of money to be in this group of other business owners who will help them solve their problems. It's interesting. I feel like I get in my community, there's a lot of people who even have built their agencies larger than I had, which is is very cool to see. And I think there's a lot of people in there who will kind of be like the next wave of, well-known creators. I would say another one is Jason Levine. I don't know if he's, like, totally under the radar, but actually I have it right here. He did this book, Memes to Millions, which I think a lot of people saw. So he's one that's, like, up and coming that I think is very interesting.
Awesome. Man, this has been awesome. Charlie Lay, everyone, where can people check you out or check out Solo Writers or learn more?
Yeah, just on Twitter. My username is Charlie W. Rich on there. That's basically where to find me, yeah.
Amazing. Charlie, thank you so much. Yeah. And everyone check him out.